but I'll be talking about what we are doing on climate change adaptation in Copenhagen today, and I'll also be talking tomorrow in something that I think is Swedish. You might think it's clear Danish. But in Copenhagen, we have been working for a number of years with adaptation. Actually, we have been working with water and the development of the connection between water and the environment for many years, starting actually back in '92 with a big plan to actually work for having swimming water quality in the inner harbor of Copenhagen. And in 2002, we were actually able, because we have managed to close off most of the combined sewer overflows. We also have a combined sewer system in Copenhagen. In most of Copenhagen, only the very new districts have separate sewer systems, but in the main part, or the majority of the city, we have a combined sewer system. So now you can actually go swimming in the harbor. But in 2008, 2009, we started working on adaptation on a more sort of integrated way, looking at what will actually happen to the city. We have made an adaptation plan, which is the one on the left, and the one on the right is the cloudburst management plan that we prepared in 2012. And these are the main documents that are guiding our work for the future, and those are the ones I'll be concentrating mostly today on how we manage stormwater, and not so much go into the question of rising sea levels. But the weather in Copenhagen is going to be warmer, wetter, and wilder in the future, just like in most other cities. So in Northern Europe. And if you look at the threats, I don't know what this thing is on the. I don't know if I can get it away. This is a picture of the risk map of Copenhagen, and the reason why it's not because they have no risks in here. It's actually because it's a different municipality, and we have now them. And you'll see in some of the later maps they are now included in what we're doing. But this on the left shows the risk from rainfall, and the other one shows the risk from rising sea levels. And as you can the redder the dots and the warmer the dots, the higher the risk and the higher the damage, the expected damages will be. And as you can see, it's the inner parts of the city, which are around here, that are most affected. That's also the denser part of the cities, and that goes the same with rising sea levels. We will not have sort of permanent, of course, depending on how bad development is in general, but we will have the risk of storm surges. It will not be big waves and so on, because we are relatively well protected as being part of the Baltic Sea, protected by Øresund, and so we will have, when we have a storm surge, it's just the water rises up. But in general, we will be able to manage up to 1.6 meters sea level rise without having serious effects on the city. When we go beyond that, we are beginning to have a problem. But we have already experienced some of the effects on cloudburst. Are you sure I have the right presentation? Because it's all in Danish. Maybe you put that one on for tomorrow? I have two presentations because, no, but this, maybe I just forgot to translate. Sorry. That's another possibility. Sometimes things are too fast. Okay. The other parts are in English, so it should be okay. This shows Copenhagen. Actually, this road is one of the main roads going into Copenhagen. What you see here is the top of a car, so you can get a picture of how much water there was. This picture is taken in August 2010, but we could take pretty much the same picture in 2011, in August 2011, and again just 2 months ago in Copenhagen. So we've had a taste of what the future will bring to us. And that's of course also been a very strong incitement for the city to start working on this, because it's already happening. And what has been critical for the city also to take action on this was the fact that, especially in July 2011, we had 150 millimeters of rain in 2 hours. It was a cloudburst that built up over Sweden. We blame you, and basically drifted over Copenhagen, where it emptied itself right over the middle of Copenhagen. But the damages actually, they ended up being close to 1 billion euro. Somebody mentioned around 700. I think it was Keys earlier on. But it's actually, when they finished counting, we're actually very close to 1 billion euros in damages. But that was the least of the problem. The real thing was that it showed that we were vulnerable because we had a lot of damage to what you can call critical infrastructure. One thing was blocked roads, but another was the fact that we nearly had to evacuate one of the 2 main hospitals in the city. Rigshospitalet, they had power cuts in their emergency room, their lifts stopped working, and the emergency generator was placed in the basement. Of course, couldn't start. And that was the thing that we found out, that our engineers have been planning the city as if basements couldn't flood, and they did. We had railroads that were blocked. We had the emergency call, or you call for the police and the fire brigade and so on. That nearly also had to close because they were also having flooding, and they were only saved by a couple of brave firefighters who ran down and lifted up the servers. So it showed to us that this is something that really disrupts the way the city works in a way that is not acceptable for a city where you would normally expect things to be working. So the whole idea of saying, looking at all of this, and this is where we get into some of the same discussions that we've had earlier, is how do we do that in a city like Copenhagen? It's built up, it's dense, and there's very, very little room. And one way could be to expand the existing sewer system, to build Thames a tunnel or something like that. It could also be working on purely green infrastructure and so on, but we actually chose to go sort of a middle way in what we're doing. So we are putting in a new infrastructure, but it's a different type of infrastructure, and I'll get back to that. But it's an infrastructure that's designed only to handle stormwater, not only in case of cloudbursts, but also in what you can call more normal conditions. I think I just forgot to translate a lot of my slides. I was so sorry, but a lot of you are Swedes, and I'll translate for the rest of you. You have adaptation is basically lifting up, improving the city's urban space. So it's not just about solving a problem, it's also about creating a better city. It's about improving the existing city. We want more green. We want multifunctional urban spaces that can do something else when we're not using them for storing water or for managing water when it's raining. And we want more quality of life for people living in the city. We also had to work on the both legislative and financing mechanisms because the type of infrastructure that we wanted to create was not possible within the Danish legislation. Stormwater management in Denmark is handled by the utilities. They get their funding from water taxes, from the water management. You pay for every cubic meter of water that you spend, and all households have their own individual meter. But we said, but if you want to do a surface structure that we wanted to do for most of our work, it had to be municipal finance. And we said, why should we take on the responsibility of the water companies, the utilities, because we are basically doing their job just because we are creating a different type of infrastructure. And we were actually able to push the Danish government into changing the legislation and making it possible to have that kind of financing where we can actually share the financing with the utilities. So they are paying for all the things that has to do with water management, and we are paying for the improvement of the urban spaces, because that's still a city responsibility and nothing to do with water management, so we're trying to keep things apart. So that's a very strong figure. If you're looking at the cost, it's not going to be cheap. We are looking at a total investment plan for the entire stormwater management plan or cloudburst management plan of 1.3 billion euros over the next 20 years. We are looking at the city estimates to be paying 1 billion Danish kroner. These are the parts that's going to be paid by the water company, and the green part is actually what's going to be paid by private people, private house owners and so on, because they also have to make sure that their buildings are safe. We cannot fix everything. Private citizens, private house owners, landowners, whatever, they have to also take a responsibility to make sure that their building is resilient to water, because we have to get used to, and that's one of our biggest tasks, is to make it very clear to people in the city that they have to get used to living in a city where it gets more wet than they've been used to before. So it's also about changing the perception that you can use your basement for living, which a lot of Danes do, especially if they have teenagers. It's very good to put them sort of somewhere where they're not as noisy and smelly, and that's but that's maybe not the best idea in the future, because the insurance companies will not keep on paying for damages which are more than what you can actually expect from basement storage and so on. We've looked at the business case, and basically we have very good economic figures for making this a mixed-use solution. We're basically looking at saying that if the price of making it by the traditional way, by making underground storage facilities, by expanding the sewer system, would be about double the price. We are looking at a solution which is cheaper, but a solution which also gives a number of other socio-economic benefits back to the city. We are having less flooding, which means also less damage. We will have lower insurance costs, and we will also, by adding this, the good thing is, by having a lot of green infrastructure, it will improve house prices and it will improve the livability of the city. Of course, it will also cost some money. We estimate that a single family home, which uses about 170 cubic meters of water per year, it will cost them about 125 euros more every year. And if you're living in a flat, it'll be a little less than 100 euro a year for these things. But we actually estimate that these money can be saved in insurance premiums by having these investments. So what have we done? Basically what we did was we said we take a new look at the city. Look at the city where we're focusing on the level of, with the eyes of water. And one of the things that you can note here is there's no hole in the middle anymore, which is because we made the cloudburst management plan together with the municipality that's located in the middle, because they need to get all the water through Copenhagen to get it out. So it wouldn't make any sense by leaving them out. So that's one thing that's a joint project. The other thing that we did was actually look at how does water flow when we let it flow by itself, following the natural topography of the city. And basically we have a number of, just like the map you showed from London, natural water courses that basically fit very well with how the original streams and so on that were in the city. Many of these are gone now or are in underground culverts like this one, for instance. But this one actually still exists as a stream. And then we've also built, you can't see it really well up here, we've built roads and railroads across, which also, of course, affects the way the water flows through the city. But through that, we made that division into 7 water catchment areas. And for each of these water catchment areas, this is just a part of one. We tried to look at where are the problem areas, where do we have the most flooding in case of a cloudburst. And how can we work also with the natural topography of the area? One of the challenges here is actually how do we prevent water from getting to here and here too quickly? how can we actually hold back water here on higher ground or up here on higher ground so that we can reduce the flooding in this. But what do we also do about the water, the surplus water that we cannot, how do we get that out? And for each of these catchment areas, the one I showed you before was the part down here, we worked with different solutions so that our politicians might have something to choose from so that they could get an idea. And I'll get back to the green and blue and pink lines in a few minutes. Because we also worked on a typology of solutions. And this is where we actually sort of are starting to combine things. Because we're talking about cloudburst boulevards. I think that's sort of a new term in city planning, but it's actually about using existing roads for transport of water. Instead of building underground pipes, why not use the existing infrastructure? If we are able to control the amount of water on the roads, we can still have a city that can work. Basically, the profile of this road, if you are a road engineer, you can probably see it, but the normal road would be higher in the middle. This one is actually lower in the middle, so that the water will collect in the middle and then follow the natural topography running downwards. You can, by saying we want a maximum of 10 centimeters of water on the road, we can still have people, we can have normal traffic, maybe a little slower because, I mean, there's still water, but the city can still work. We also have boulevards meant for delaying the water. And these are, for instance, in areas where we're going from very high ground to lower ground, where we say we want the water to go down, but at the same time, maybe not as fast because we cannot handle so much on the at the lower level. So these will have, for instance, they can also be used for transporting water, but they will have built-in, could be green factors, but it could also be architectural, it could be traffic slowing figures, or things that could also influence the speed of the water. Finally, we're talking about water squares or water storage areas in the city. It can be in a park, it could be a square like the one we saw from Rotterdam, where we can temporarily store water for a limited period of time, or if it's possible, we can also let it basically sink into the ground. Having infiltration in Copenhagen is not very easy. Both we have a high level of groundwater, and that will keep rising with climate change and rising sea levels. We are built on clay. Clay is very good for holding water, but not very good for infiltration. And finally, there's the issue of polluted land and the protection of the groundwater. So they are we did a study on where can we actually infiltrate, and the hope is that we can disconnect about 30% of roofs and so on in the city, but how much we can actually infiltrate of that is still up for debate. So it's actually about having these three basic systems. And to that we will also be adding pipes, because there will be places in the city where we have to cross a big road. The topography might be against actually transporting the water directly into the harbor, or delaying not enough room for storing it. So there will be areas, a few places where we will actually be building some pipes, and some of them big. I think we can. We have one where we can compete, maybe not with London, but with some of the others, because we need them to collect a lot of water and lead it into the harbor. Because one of the things that we have learned from having these massive cloudbursts is that it is a lot of water you need to handle in a very, very short time. So all tree huggers, go home. You cannot handle that. You have to think a combination of solutions. And these are some examples I want to show you. That was the map before with the blue spots. Vesterbro, central part in the city. This is how it looked 2 months ago at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's not a river, it's actually a street. But one of the things that we are looking at there is actually also to reduce costs. We have considered Vesterbro is located down here. There's a lot of water coming up here. We have big flooding in this area, and we have a lot of flooding down here. The obvious thing was to build a big pipe here, and then actually collect that surface water and lead it into the pipe and into the harbor. But we decided maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe we can use the fact that we have a number of existing lakes, and one of them, the southernmost of these lakes, is actually quite deep. If we permanently lower the level of this lake by a couple of meters, we can store an awful lot of water in that. We can basically use it as a retention basin where we can store water during a cloudburst. But when it's not raining, you will have much wider banks than you used to have. Why not use these banks for something that gives something back to the city? Create a park in an area in the city where we are lacking green space, where we are lacking recreative areas for the citizens, and make that park in a way where it can handle being flooded. Just like they actually have in Hamburg, the Hafen city, the green areas there, they can be flooded for a short period of time. The same we can do with this pipe. And then a pipe will empty the lake, and that pipe can also collect surface water from the rest of the area. This is an example of the flooded street I showed you before, changed into a boulevard for delaying water, where you can again have a lot of urban life and use the green area for recreative purposes when it's not raining, but transporting and delaying water as it passes through the district when it's raining. This is one of the major boulevards in Copenhagen. It's the City Hall on the left, and that's one of the a possible cloudburst boulevard where you can actually again have a runoff from the water down towards the harbor, and make sure that there's still passage for the traffic, even though you are in a situation where it's been raining a lot. So it's about integrating these solutions into the city, working with landscape architecture, with engineers, city planners, traffic planners, and so on and so forth, in order to create solutions that fit together with what you want to do in your city. So it's not just about handling water, it's about making it work together in the rest of the city. So what have we got now? We got 300 projects. This is what I had a meeting with our politicians. They actually set off a whole day to discuss the plan a month ago. We prepared 1,200 pages for them to read. And they basically they said yes, they thought it was a very good idea. And they're prepared, and they want to have a maximum focus on the synergy with other urban projects, and they want to have a maximum focus on improving the urban fabric and the urban spaces. So we're looking at an implementation plan which has an expected time period of 20 years. Every year they want us to present a new project package. Which projects do you want to start this year? And how do we prioritize them? It's about, of course, water management, but it's also about fitting them into what's also going on in the city, using the synergies. When we are digging up a lot of the district heating to convert it from a steam-based system to a water-based system, why not at the same time look at the water management issues on these streets? It saves the Copenhageners a lot of trouble, and it saves us also a lot of money in only having to dig up the roads once. And this is just a map to show you the main structure. Here you have that project that I was talking about with the lake and the tunnel. Here we are using the natural streams, and this is one that's going to be a very big system, because it's going to drain all that area through surface projects that will lead the water towards that tunnel and into that area. This is also where you had the picture of the flooded highway, so it's a real problematic area. And this is just a map showing all the projects, just to see that there's probably nowhere in the city we will not be touching over the next 20 years. But it's also a lot, as I said, a lot, I'll talk more about that tomorrow, cooperation and co-creation with the utility. We are working in a close partnership with them on all aspects. We are working very closely with the citizens. We've had a lot of public hearing on these plans. They are very positive. The same as our politicians, they sometimes wonder, why does it have to take 20 years to implement all of this? But when we try to, when we manage to explain the complexity and the whole integratedness of the plan, they can normally understand that. But it's on partnership with private landowners and organizations. It's working very closely with other municipalities and with local committees and neighborhood regeneration projects to make sure that we have a local anchoring, because citizens are ultimately the ones who knows best what's going on in their neighborhood and what they need. We might have to tell them where the water's going to run, but if we're designing urban spaces, we need the citizens to be on board, because they're the ones who are going to live with it. It's very important that it's an integrated process and not just something that we are putting in the city. And finally, sort of this is my sort of my mantra is it's all about, for me, is saying that adaptation. We should stop thinking about adaptation as an extra layer, that we should integrate it. It's a precondition for our future urban planning. It's not just something that we talk about now and then. It's something we should actually always think about when we are working and planning in the city. It will influence how we plan and utilize urban spaces, and it will also change. A lot of people have also asked me, why are we running so fast in Copenhagen? Wouldn't it be better for us to wait and find up maybe somebody will think up better solutions? Well, I said somebody has to start work on this and be the ones who make the first and second and third generation of climate adaptation projects, because from that we will learn and improve. And I'm sure that when we in 20 years' time, when I take my grandchild and walk around and say, this is what your grandmother did, and if there's some young architect student there, will probably say, why did you do that? But that was what we did with the knowledge that we had at that time. And I think that's also, we should probably not talk about, somebody said, to repeat the mistakes of the past. I think it was Lykke's. I think nobody made mistakes. They did the best they knew at the given time. And somebody will also criticize me one day for the mistakes that I'm making, but I do it with the best of intention and with the knowledge that is there at the moment. So it will influence the development and planning of recreative spaces and urban spaces in general. And we want to make sure that we are the ones in control of the water in the future. And that also comes to the part where we are not good enough yet in Copenhagen, is about harvesting and reusing rainwater. But I hope that is something that we can get into the plan as we're moving along. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lykke. Questions? Way back, microphone. You said one word that I've been listening for, longing for, and that is synergies.
Yes.
I don't think that word has been mentioned, but that's what I have in my mind. It's all about synergy.
It's all about synergies, because it's about thinking, things together. And also, if you're looking at these spaces, which, when you're talking about multifunctional spaces, it's also about synergies. And you're talking about flexibility, because we are working from the climate projections that we have now. They might change over the next 20 years. And so, yeah, probably.
Question?
Hi, Misa from... I'm Misa from Lund University. I was wondering, how do architects get the information when they want to get involved in a new project? Are these information included in comprehensive plan or master plan or detailed plan, or how do you start to communicate with them?
Well, we've been blessed with a management in the city who have really been supporting us for that. So we got the maximum backup, and they've basically declared that this is a top one priority for Copenhagen over the next years, is actually to get this in place. So all new planning has to take this into consideration. So when our city planners are working on a local plan, when we're working on the city master plan, it all has to integrate climate change adaptation. All new projects have to be screened for adaptation issues, and we even have permission to go in and stop projects that are in the planning phase if they haven't done it, and say to them, you have to think, even if it means delaying the project, rather than having to go back a few years later and dig up the whole thing again. It has created a lot of tension inside the city. They don't like me when I come and say, well, I'm going to stop that bicycle path project because we need to integrate it with water management as well. But that's very good to have the city back up to do that. And secondly, I mean, all projects in the city go out for public tender. So, I mean, architects, consultants who want to work for the city, they will, of course, get all the information as part of the tender.
Question here, Kiss.
Yeah, Lykke, thanks a lot for your very clear presentation. I'm really following it very closely because I think it's a very nice example. And criticism, by the way, is the fuel of excellence. So take initiative and let people criticize and learn from you. So I'm very very grateful that you have come up with it. It may be the time of the day, but I do want to understand your business case. So you started with the explanation that you had some damage close to 1 billion. Then, if I'm correct, you proposed a plan that was costing 1.3 billion of investment.
Yes.
But it could prevent later on another damage that would create another 1 billion of damage.
Yes.
Is that correct? So could you easily convince your politicians that the cost of enacting would be much higher than to take action?
Yeah. In our adaptation plan, we had actually estimated that over the next 100 years, we expected the damages from rain to amount to something like close to a little more than 2 billion euros. At the same time, we could also tell our politicians that in the first 4 years since they approved the adaptation plan, we had already had damages for more than 1.2 billion euros. And the idea that we would only have damages for 1 billion euro over the next 96 years was probably a little bit too conservative. So that was a good starting point. And then if you can then say to them, okay, even if we keep the conservative estimate of a little more than 2 billion euros in expected damages, and we are talking about investing 1.3 billion, it's still a good business case. If you also, on top of that, add to all the things that we can do for the city as we develop it at the same time. And it was actually, I had also expected when I went to that meeting with our politicians and had to explain all of this in much greater detail, I was really nervous and had sort of, were they going to play along or were they just going to sit there and say, oh, that's very well, but we have all the priorities like parking and cars and blah, blah, blah. But they were really focused because they could also see that this could be a threat in general to the city. They could see investments going out. We have had a few incidents. For instance, the WHO, they have a headquarters in Copenhagen, and their previous office there was located at a place, and the third time they flooded in 3 years, they called us and said, if we are not fixing that, we are moving out.
Yes.
That's not a good thing. That even came up to the government level, and we had to act very quickly in fixing something for them, because it's a bad case for Copenhagen. It would really be bad branding. And secondly, it's also very bad for the world, because if the WHO system doesn't work, it's not just a question of a few secretaries getting wet feet in an office in Denmark. It's about the whole communication system worldwide breaking down, which is about a sort of human tragedy rather than just a nuisance.
Thanks.
I have a final question.
There was also...
Oh, there's another one. Yes.
I'm Liu Jinhan from China. I'm a government employee for the Beijing municipality. You said that Copenhagen is always influenced by the cloudbursts. In fact, that in Beijing we have experienced such a cloudburst, but not too often. The 2011, in that year, we had a flood that caused a lot of damage. But the politician that time was very concerned about this flood. But these last couple of years, we didn't have much rain. Obviously, it's a dry place, and sometimes we experience such of damage. So what's your suggestion or advice for our city? Should we invest too much money on this kind of project?
We are actually signing a memorandum of understanding with Beijing on one of the things that we're looking at will be stormwater management, but it's I don't think I can advise Beijing on what to do. I think that you have to look at climate projections. What do they actually say for your region, and try to act accordingly. I mean, you can say that for my agenda, we've been lucky to have 4 incidents like that, because it's made it very, very clear for politicians that whether this is climate change or not, a weather like that and situations like that are unacceptable for a city that wants to function well. We've also had discussions, how long will this actually keep on the city's agenda? And of course, after 2011, in 2012 and 2013, there was nothing. And it was also a little bit slipping down.
Yeah.
Then I very practically organized this cloudburst on the 31st of August, just the day before the city budget negotiations started. Somebody accused me of having very good connections. But it's, I don't really think, I mean, the picture there is from that day, and that's the same street that you saw in the other picture. Actually, that car there is floating as the bus wave hits it. So it is about, I think it's about thinking, but even if you don't have big incidents like that, you can work on it on a scale like Lykke was also suggesting from Hamburg. You can work on it, how to slowly integrate it in the way that you are planning in your city. And every little step you take will make you more resilient, will make you better adapted to what you're doing. And then, if there's a momentum, you can work for the bigger combined solutions that we are also seeing here, that we have the momentum for in Copenhagen. But I think you should integrate it into your city planning, because no matter what, I mean, climate change will impact the way cities work.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you, Lykke. Thank you very much.